Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:51 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley Brewer. Let's get straight to my next guest and talk about, well, we talk about Gary Lineker, which very much relates to Israel and Gaza, because former footballers absolutely know the most it's possible to know about any of these things. But let's talk to Natasha Hausdorff, who's a barrister and legal director at UK Lawyers for Israel. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
In no way is this the most important subject today in terms of certainly what is going on in Gaza and indeed with Israel. But can I ask your thoughts on Gary Lineker's decision to, we understand, to quit the BBC, to leave on-air commentary as of this coming Sunday? He's not going to be there for the World Cup after that anti-Semitic post, which he actually himself apologised and withdrew. The first time he's ever done that. What do you make of that decision?
Well, given the long history of Gary Lineker's problematic comments with respect to Israel and unfortunately Jews more broadly, it's rather too little too late. Already in 2020, there were complaints by UK Lawyers for Israel about breaches by Gary Lineker of the BBC's own guidelines on social media. Not least because at the time he was lamenting the death of a terrorist, Ahmed Deraghmeh, a Hamas terrorist who was killed in the context of a firefight, as I recall, who also happened to play football, except the context of him being a Hamas terrorist was entirely absent from Gary Lineker's remarks. So this has been many, many years of difficult commentary that is, of course, entirely inconsistent with the way that employees of the BBC ought to be conducting.
Yeah, the rules seem to be completely different for him from everyone else, didn't they? Let's talk about what is happening on the ground, because we have had this huge Israeli offensive to basically seize control of Gaza. We understand that civilians are going to be pushed into, I think, 4 different areas where they're going to get access to food and to be safe. We understand that after a 10-week blockade, Israel is going to allow some basic amount of food into Gaza. The accusations have been flying thick and fast about this, it's deadly, this is genocide, more than 100 people killed, many, civilians and children among them. We've got British doctors in hospitals in Gaza talking about the devastation and the loss. We're told that these huge part of the population face famine within a short matter of time because of the lack of food. What do you have to say about all of that?
So it's so important to have the opportunity to set so much of this context right. What we have seen since the ceasefire fell apart, and it fell apart, let's not forget, because Hamas refused to continue releasing hostages that it has kept in brutal conditions for well over a year and a half now. Once that ceasefire fell apart, aid stopped going into Gaza because there was more than sufficient that had been provided. That ceasefire enabled aid to flood into Gaza. Those are the words used by the Israeli authorities. So much so that there was a stockpile which was estimated to be able to last between 5 and 6 months. Now, of course, we're nowhere near the 5 and 6 months. To the extent that there are reports that food is running out in Gaza, it begs the question, where on earth has all of that food and humanitarian assistance gone?
We've been told there's going to be a famine, that people are starving and famine is imminent, I think pretty much for a year now. And that doesn't seem to be the case, funnily enough.
Well, indeed. And actually, UK Lawyers for Israel have done a substantial analysis and review of all of those false reports predicting famine and starvation in the past, many of them based on only partial information. And as you say, those predictions, some of which came immediately after the 7th of October of famine and starvation, have failed to materialise, principally because the level of aid that Israel has facilitated into the Gaza Strip has far exceeded the needs of the civilian population.
Okay, but we know that Hamas, it's well documented, isn't it, that Hamas has actually been taking some of the aid, or large amounts of the aid, and then sell it on themselves, and it's a way of them being in control. But there has been a concern about, innocent, regardless of that, innocent people, particularly children, are suffering. In terms of the criticisms of Israel on that issue, do you think that those arguments are fair? Because we've also had criticism, for instance, a recent strike on/near a major hospital where we're told, again, we can't, we're often told these things are guaranteed true. The Hamas health ministry has said this or that. I'm sorry, this is a terror group. They've lied before on numerous occasions, been found out, and yet still treated as if they're honest actors. The civilians died. But we've also since discovered that the latest leader of Hamas on the ground, Mohammed Sawar, the brother of the last one who got killed, that he was killed in this attack. So if it weren't the case that Hamas fighters were using hospital grounds to hide themselves, that wouldn't have happened. So once again, Israel was proved correct, weren't they?
Yes, it's been a matter of public record all the way back from 2008 that Hamas are using hospitals as their command and control centres. So ludicrous that we would take, I'm afraid, anything that the Hamas-controlled media in Gaza report at face value, as so much of the media have done. And really important to note that this new operation, which has been termed Gideon's Chariots, has at its core a number of objectives. Improving the humanitarian position is one of them, because it will enable Israel to prevent, to a certain extent, Hamas from continuing to divert that aid, as you've identified they have been doing from the outset of this war. It will also enable Israel to apply pressure so that Hamas is no longer refusing to engage in negotiations to release those hostages. And that's a critical factor, not least when we think of the latest hostage to be released, the American citizen, dual American citizen, who essentially was released at the say-so of Qatar. We can see some of the issues at play here, that Qatar essentially tell Hamas one way or the other to hold on.
But by all means, let's all just play nicely with Qatar. Can I just ask you finally, because I'm sorry, time is against us, so much going on today. But the Eurovision on Saturday night, we saw, as always, demonstrations, protests against the Israeli entry. She was a survivor of the Nova massacre. She hid among 50 people, had to basically play dead for hours underneath dead bodies to survive that massacre. And she was singing a song of great hope. And this is Yuval Raphael. There were protests, but she won, interestingly, the public vote in numerous countries, including in the UK. We have a lot of people, the Gary Linekers and others, who spout their hatred about Israel, but actually there was a lot of love for Israel on Saturday night from ordinary members of the public, wasn't there?
I think testament to the quality of that song and the quality of the performance, which year after year Israel has really outdone itself in. Remarkable, though, I would say, that this song, so rooted in Yuval's own experience of surviving that massacre, she only started singing professionally after experience and as a mark of the new lease of life that she was given.
Yeah, what I find extraordinary is one of the people who protested, who was arrested, was a member of Youth Demand who wanted to throw blood over a young Israeli woman who had survived a massacre by hiding under the dead bodies of her friends and was performing at a music event. It just kind of tells you everything about the sickness of the people who are opposed to this. Natasha Hausdorff, thank you so much for joining us. Going to get Sam Armstrong's thoughts on this and yours too coming up. This is Talk, the home of common sense.